Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and I am doing an evening live stream, evening U.S. time, 10 p.m. Central time, not a time I usually do, other than when I have panels. And I do not have a panel plan today. It's just had a few people, sorry, I'm pushing keys and stuff off to the side. I had a few people ask me if I would do one of these streams like I do the panels, not on the weekend. And I thought, well, why not both? I have a time period available today that I was able to do it, coupled with I will still have the live stream tomorrow morning, and we will see if anyone actually makes it, because this is not the usual time that I would do these sort of things. But regardless, hopefully it will be at least entertaining as a recording, if not in the live format. So we're not going to cover any of the new watch releases. That will be done tomorrow on that live stream. But today, I'm going to actually instead focus on the idea of watch brands that I will not own anymore. I had to put I had my clickbait thumbnail, but as I noted in the title, currently, I won't, as a general rule, I won't permanently roll out any sort of brand. However, given my experience with watch collecting, and I've been through a lot of brands at this point, there's just certain ones that I am not interested in anymore. And I found 5 of them that I thought would be a good focus today. And they actually, each one has a different reason or reasons as to why I won't really consider them. So housekeeping items out of the way. Today on the wrist is a vintage piece. This is a Spiro Agnew watch from the Dirty Time Company. I wear this on occasion simply to make sure that the lubricants stay on all the wheels and such. So I actually do put it on from time to time, usually once every few months. So tomorrow I'll probably wear another one of the novelty watches, because that's what I try and remember to keep them in rotation, because I do not wear them all that often. This is actually my 3rd watch on today, because I mowed earlier when I got home from work. So I put the G-Shock on for that. And then when I was at work was the Longa one. So I don't normally go through more than 1 watch in a day, and almost never more than 2. But I decided this one needed to get some wrist time, and thus that is what I am doing. So no pre-recorded videos or anything to go over in terms of summary. I am podcasting tomorrow morning. That podcast will come out on Monday. That is a pinball podcast. And because I normally record that on Sunday, there is a chance that I may be delayed in actually starting the live stream. I shouldn't be. I've communicated with my co-host. I'm shifting the schedule to accommodate him, because he is busy on Sunday. And so I was a little worried about that. And I also thought maybe this would be a way to somewhat make amends for that. So let me get caught up with the chat, and then we will get started with this discussion. So good evening to the Escapement Show. Glad you could make it. And Kevin, welcome. You're usually the first one in on the Saturday ones. I appreciate you being here. So I do not know if the live stream is going to be active or not, but regardless, I will try and make this as entertaining as possible. I have a few images of watches from the brands that I'm going to talk about. And so let's really just go ahead and get into it. So the first brand that I will not consider buying another model of is actually IWC, or formerly known as International Watch Company. This is actually a photo of a Portuguese, it's before the Portugueser. This was actually when they were still calling it the Portuguese, that I did own. And a very large watch. This one actually used a pocket watch movement, but this is not specific to a particular model. This is about the brands themselves. And the issue that I have run into with IWC is sort of twofold, maybe threefold would possibly be a way to say it. One is a lot of their watches, but not all of them. That's why I said 3. This one's the lesser issue, is the sizing. So I do like their pilot watches, and I do like the Portugueser line, as me owning this particular model would somewhat suggest. However, I do not like how big they are, especially when I favor the Portuguese line, and that is really a dress watch format. And I will still wear larger watches. However, I went through a part in my collecting journey where I had a number of larger watches, like I had a Cartier Santos 100. Those are the big ones. I had this, had a number of dive watches. And I've moved less towards that and more towards smaller watches, but especially dress watches. I don't have a single dress watch that's 40 millimeter. They're all less than that. And this thing was like 44. So IWC, they do have smaller models. It's just most of their famous catalog is bigger. However, there are a couple of other issues that I have a problem with the brand on. One is almost every design that they've got is so generic that I don't know why I would go with them over someone else. So let's take this one that you see on the screen as an example. You take the Portuguese watch. What other watches kind of look like this? Any Calatrava-esque watch probably falls into that category. So there are just so many other dress watches to consider. JLC, Patek, Longa, Vacheron, AP not so much anymore unless you want to go vintage. But my point being that, so on the dress watch side, I've got other like better brands for the same dollar amount. Yes, a Patek's going to run more than an IWC Portugueser, but you could get a JLC around the same price. So it's like, well, where's that fit in? So let's jump to the pilot watches, which is the other category I really like Fliegers. But they have some of the most expensive Fliegers that there are. And I don't see what you get for it. Why not get a Stova or a Laco instead of an IWC? It's still got all the heritage. If you want one of the original manufacturers of Fliegers, they're going to appeal just as much as IWC would. About the only brand that I know that makes Fliegers at the same price as IWC is Vempe. And Vempe is not even known as a manufacturer anymore. It's almost like Bucherer as a manufacturer, where it's more known for the sales brand. Vempe is in that same boat. But it's another one of the original manufacturers, so I mentioned them. Everything else is ho-hum. Their dive watches have never been appealing, in my opinion. They're not talked about by the collector community writ large. You've got the Portofino and those style of watches, which are the more affordable ones, but they all are using basically slightly renamed ETA or Sellita based movements. So the movement tech isn't there. And it's like, what are you getting for the dollar amount? Because even though it's less than, like, a Portofino is less than a Portugueser, but what are you getting with that savings? You give up a lot for it. And is it really worth it? The designs are okay, but they're not inspired. About the only design you could probably argue is truly inspired to IWC is the Ingenieur. And the Ingenieur came out and it was super expensive as well. So all said and done, this one is more, so that led into the second or the third item, I guess, because the first one was that sizing. The second one was sort of the generic nature of so many of their watches. And the third is the dollar amount itself. So IWC asks for a lot for a brand that doesn't retain value. Obviously, you get them secondhand. I got this watch secondhand when I had it. But it's just, there's nothing interesting in their catalog right now. They do some case material stuff a la the Panerai wood or Hublot wood. Like, they're playing with case materials in their pilot watches in particular, I think in a desperate attempt to try and attract a new audience, but they're not really changing the designs. And while we see this, brands get long in the tooth. JLC, for example, struggles mightily with their sports watch line. IWC struggles mightily with their everything line. And the Ingenieur, I think, was their one big good shot. It was a throwback, but it was a new approach to the throwback. But the price was twice what it should have been, and so that one thing, I've looked at older Ingenieurs. I just cannot right now get into anything that they've got. So currently, they're the first brand of the 5 that I've ruled out for me. Could they change it? Absolutely. I don't hate anything about IWC. A lot of their designs, I think, are very attractive, at least in a generic sort of fashion. It's just either the pricing would have to come down, which there's no way they're going to do that, or they need to get something that feels like from across the room, you can look and you can say, that's an IWC. I can't even say that's true for the pilot watches anymore. And maybe that's not their fault. It's just like, it's not Rolex's fault that every micro brand out there has a Submariner clone, but nonetheless, the reality is what it is. So anyway, so that's the first one I wanted to discuss. And let me go ahead and see what the chat has said, because I do see there have been a few comments. So the Escapement Show says, that's interesting. I get the oversizing of the Portugueser, but I love the Lake Tahoe Pilot's watch, albeit a little too expensive for me. I really do lust after a vintage IWC Mark 11, though. Again, attractive models of the Lake Tahoe. Again, they are doing some tweaks to the Pilot watches in an attempt to, I think, modernize them and make them attractive to individuals. To mixed degrees, I think, again, but what you noted, and I'll throw it back up here on the screen, is it's the pricing for what you get. The pricing is tough. And again, we can get past that, right? If we go gray or we go secondhand, we can, a lot of that hit will be taken out of it. So there won't really be a huge sting necessarily. I haven't looked to see how much the Lake Tahoes might actually go down in price. But yeah, it's a brand that I kind of feel they've got the name recognition. I even know more of their model lines than I do a lot of other brands, but there's just nothing that clicks anymore. And I just think for the stuff I like is so I like bland stuff, right? Those of you who've watched the channel a while know I'm pretty into boring watches. So again, I just let my Stova go. I would be more likely to get Stova is not one of the 5 on this list. I would get another Stova again before I would ever get another IWC. And that's just sort of the boat I'm in with them. They don't do, the Portuguese line look great. The oversizing that the Escapement Show points out, that is a very iconic thing. But again, they're not the only ones in that game anymore. Large dress watches, Vacheron practically has that market cornered now. They have plenty of like 41 millimeter plus sized patrimonies that you can get. And honestly, the dials, do they look better? In some ways they do. I do prefer IWC's leaf handset to baton style hands, but or pencil. I think they use pencil on the patrimonies generally, but regardless, it's just one of those things that we end up in. Cloud, Ken, welcome to the live stream. Evening all, love the late night Rebel streaming. I didn't know I was a rebel for finally doing one on a Friday, but it is different, so I'll take it. I also wouldn't buy a brand owned by a dealer, including De Bethune. Interesting. I've heard your arguments. I think it's you who's made them before, Ken, about the problem that you have with a company that isn't focused on making watches, but maybe was focused on being a business. But De Bethune did start as a watchmaking brand that just got acquired by a dealer. So why does that contaminate? I mean, obviously we all make our own choices. I'm just curious why that contaminates it versus say a Bucherer that maybe was known as being a selling brand first and then decided to spin up a watch company. And I could maybe see that a little more because it was like they deliberately diversified from what their core thing was, whereas 1916 company just decided we're going to invest as like venture capitalists. The skate reel says 100% agree on nothing interesting in their catalog. Again, I like a lot of their dial designs. Nothing, I can't think of anything that IWC does that I actually actively hate, but I just can't groove with it. Underachieving Watch Collector asks, does IWC makes a dive watch? They did. I think it's still in the catalog. In fact, I would have to double check what it is called. But yes, they do. In fact, I recommended it to someone. Some other YouTube channel was talking about watches, and he had a certain style. He's a big Tudor collector. I can't remember the channel name off the top of my head. I apologize if he ends up seeing this. So I left a comment, and I gave him some suggestions. And one of the things is, he was kind of looking at what's like a Tudor, but he didn't want to keep buying Tudors. I think he does still want to buy Tudors, but I think he was trying to convince himself to explore some other things. And so I did suggest the IWC dive watches that they used to make because the older ones were in the price range that he was wanting to play in. And I thought some of the aesthetics to them, again, much like a lot of IWC, you just get these vibes from other brands. And I thought some of that Tudor stuff kind of felt similar. So anyway, that was the idea. So Matthew, thank you for joining in and for being a 99-cent club member. Says, hi, Mara is watching and wearing your Stova now. So Matthew bought my old Stova. So that's why he mentions that. His wife has confiscated the Stova and now it is her Stova. So I'm glad at least someone gets to wear it. And let's see. Escapement says, greets Ken and says, it's an interesting point he'd never thought of. Brands that dealers have a stake in, De Bethune being a good example. I can only think of Long Island Watch that are another. I mean, with Ken, we've had conversations before about other diversified brands. I know this applies to a lot of the fashion brands, like a discomfort with Mont Blanc. They're known for pins. Why are they making watches now? Hermes, they're known for bags. Why are they making watches now? And some of these, I don't agree completely. I see some things like I think Mont Blanc has turned out some very nice looking watches. I like, again, kind of in the IWC vein. Bucherer has some watches I think are attractive, but have never appealed to me. And then I look at other brands like Versace and their watches look like trash. So, I mean, there's a whole spectrum on whether I think you could go in and say, is it carte blanche? They ruin brands or they can't make good watches, or can they make good watches, even if that's not their sole focus? But obviously someone might, and I think that's his stance, and he can explain his stance better than I can, would be the preference to have a watchmaker that is only concerned with watches, because you know that will be their singular focus. And obviously those brands do not do that. Underachieving says, Dennis, your Spiro Agnew is many things, but boring isn't one of them. That's very kind of you, but I didn't buy the Spiro. This Spiro Agnew was a gift, and the other Spiro Agnew that I never wear because the movement hasn't been serviced, it was a gift as well. Skateman asks Aqua Timer, yes, thank you. I see the name, even the name, it's too much like Aqua Racer from Tag Heuer. So how can we remember these things? We can't. We're just human. Folks, we're just humans. IWC, why do you have to make it sound? I don't even know which one, like the Aqua Racer or the Aqua Timer was first. I don't care. At this point, we're rolling with it as a quasi rant, and we're saying, IWC, you need to change the model line name. You can't be compared to Tag. You don't want to sync to that. But honestly, I'd be much more likely to buy an Aqua Racer. I actually think the new ones look pretty good. Koji, thank you for being a 99-cent club member, by the way. I very much like the vintage IWC, particularly their iconic 89 movement hand wound and their 853 automatic with the Peloton system. Again, they have the tech. They do good watchmaking. I'm not criticizing them on their watchmaking front, but I just cannot see myself getting into the brand unless they make some shifts. Ken says, yeah, it's a bit different, but when a dealer owns a brand, they tend to oversell and manipulate it. Hence, some integrity is lost in the watch itself. I do admit, even when I watch like Tim Masso's stream, which I like to try and catch his live stream on Mondays, Debethune almost always seems to come up, and it's hard not to feel like the corporate overlords say, you will mention Debethune in every episode that you do. It's hard not to get that vibe. And again, I question how much they sell those for, just like when I've bought a number of watches through 1916 Company, but just like when they were cornering the market on FP Journes and the prices were ridiculous. I mean, Journes are still pretty high pricing, not like it was, obviously nothing's like it was in the pandemic, but it kind of felt like it got driven up more than it should have just because there was some market cornering, which again, it's a capitalist tactic. I get it. It's just, if you're trying to provide opinions on stuff, it's tough when you know that they've got a whole bunch of what stock is available, or they actually own stake in the company. So that, I think those are very good points. Skateman says, of course, Carl F. Bucherer. Yeah, I mean, that's the good case in point one of a kind of from the ground up, started as a brand selling watches and then decided they wanted to have their own watchmaking entity. And I still am curious what will happen with the Bucherer watchmaking brand now that Rolex owns Bucherer. Do they really want to operate a third brand? I think they will for a while. Are they going to still let it have its own identity and move forward? I question whether they want to do that or not, but I have absolutely no idea. Space G95, evening from Maryland, not from space. You're saying good evening from Maryland. Well, glad to hear from you. I have not been to Maryland. Heard some good presentations from some people out of Baltimore when I was in Detroit, though, several months ago. And let's see, Brent is greeting Thomas, and they are saying hello back. So let's go ahead and jump to brand number 2. All right, we started on one where I criticized the pricing with IWC, right? All right, let's do another shift. Let's talk, I'll blow it up bigger here, Vostok. So Vostok, the Russian brand. And I'm not going to use the war as the reasoning behind this, though one could easily grasp onto that for a purpose. This is very different. Unlike IWC, where my criticisms were mostly around the pricing and kind of the generic nature of so much of their watchmaking, Vostok watches don't look like anything else. However, it's the movements. The movements are why I would never consider another Vostok. So for those of you who have never owned Vostok, I'm not going to say don't get one, because they're very interesting watches. They're exceedingly quirky, and the movements are extremely quirky. I enjoyed actually owning it. In fact, that was, and the watch you see here was the one I owned. This was the first watch I ever regulated. So it was the first time I learned how to regulate. I watched some guides online, and this is the one I was like, it's cheap enough. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to try and make it run better, because we're talking about a movement that was like plus or minus 60 seconds a day was seen as in spec. Those might not be the exact specifications of the movement. Do not judge me. So anyway, it was just, I'm glancing at some of the chat comments. So I'm cheating. That's why I'm laughing a little bit, but So anyway, here's the thing, and you can see here, it's a very simple time plus date watch. They have their dive versions. This is the Komorderski is what I had. However, the movements, there are only a few movements that they actually have with Vostok. Here's the thing. Almost all of their watches have date windows. Not all of them do, but almost all of them do. There is no quick set, at least not with a bunch of them. Not with this movement. I guess I'm not pointing the right way. Not with this one that you see over here. Oh my God. It is a nightmare. If it was your only watch, it would probably be okay because you would constantly keep it wound. And this is not an automatic. This is a hand wind only watch. But the problem with it is if you don't wear this watch only, if you do not keep it wound and it is time to reset it, you cannot just pull the crown out into one position and toggle that date. It's not even like a GMT watch where you'll have to just rotate the hour hand around really quickly and jump that date. No, you have to go around and around and around. Yes, there is a trick where you can go about to 2 a.m., take the watch back to about 9 p.m., and then kind of jump it forward like that. I read about that. I did test it. It did work. It's still super tedious. It is faster than actually going around 24 hours with as slow as it is to spin those hands, but it is tedious. I can't do it. I don't know if it's a snob thing or what. I can't have a watch like that anymore. Like if I know there are Rolex day dates that didn't have quick set, like I cannot own a non-quick set date watch anymore. It has to at least let me jump the hour hand. It's the bare minimum I've got at this point. And so just incidentally, everything else other than like could be a fun watch to play around with and experience the weird like loose stem and how they got the water resistance on the more dive oriented watches. Nothing else about this watch is good. The only thing good about it is like the cheapest in-house movement you could ever possibly have. That is the only thing going for Vostok. No quick set date. The friction fit bezel is the worst bezel I've ever experienced in my entire watch collecting career. This leather strap that it came on doesn't even feel like leather. I can't describe what it feels like. It feels like fail. That's the only way I can describe it. It feels shockingly cheap. Like the strap was made out of wax itself. That I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it. Interesting, quirky watches. The Luma, incidentally, was also trashed here. You get what you pay for, and this watch cost me, I think, $45 back when I bought it new. So, again, fascinating to work on, fascinating to look at. It also was hard to get into the case. You need like one of the wrenches because it's got the case is not. It's a ring that locks the case down on the back, not the entire case back. So the case back isn't screwed down. There's a ring. So you can't just like use a little rubber ball. You have to use a wrench because you can only move the ring. It's nothing about it. It's quirky Soviet tech. It's weird. If you're into weird, definitely consider it. But I will never own this brand again. Never, never, ever. So it's just, there's nothing good about it. Unless you are into quirky, if you do not want to spend a lot of money and you want an in-house mechanical watch, I'm going to tell you, save an extra $100 and get an Orient. That is the objectively right answer for you. If you want something weird and quirky, by all means, Vostok has got you covered. But if you're like, I want in-house, I want mechanical, I don't want to spend a lot of money, trust me, save. I've had both brands. Save up a little bit more money and just get an Orient instead. You will be much happier unless you want all those weird quirks. So, all right. So with that, let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat here. I see we've got more people engaging. Skate Reel says, Vostok, very excited. But then Garbaggio movements, thumb down. Yes, the movement, again, that was my entire point. I didn't have a criticism on IWC's movements other than they put any Bosch movements on watches that are way too priced for Bosch movements. And you have to really spend the money on them to jump up into the higher, like the Portuguesers will get you internal, in-house generated movements, but these, they're in-house, but it ain't a great house. Let's just put it that way. The Gorn, welcome to the live stream. Vostok are for people who don't own stock. Well, I mean, I would say they're for two types of people. Those that want mechanical and want something like the bare bottom dollar thing. I'm not going to say they're the cheapest mechanical watch out there. I think there's some other cheaper stuff on AliExpress that you can get, but they are the cheapest that uses in-house that I am aware of. The other reason would be just like you're really into quirk. Escapement Show says, I guess Vostok are an accessible brand for people with not much money. So I guess you get what you pay for. Basically, I do have to point out, there are two different Vostoks also. This that we are talking about here is what I call original Vostok. But there is also Vostok East, which I believe is actually based in the West. But they tend to be a few $100s, and I've not owned one of those, so I can't comment on them. The general consensus has been that they are better, but again, for the price, you would hope so. So, Patrick with Pocket Watch Time. Yes, it is a rare exception. I was feeling like I wasn't doing enough for the channel, people, so I thought let's do one on Friday. I'm exhausted, post mowing, post working. I'm still going to do the live stream tomorrow morning. But I got a podcast between now and then as well that I need to record. So it's going to be, my voice may be really bad tomorrow. We're going to cover new watches tomorrow. This is just kind of a fun conversation on brands that I have abandoned, at least for the time being, have abandoned. Goran says, I bought one for my nephew for his 16th birthday. Hopefully he doesn't hate mechanical watches now. Yes, I do wonder this. What I did with this watch is it's all mirrored for me because I'm using my right monitor to display the secondary screen that I always share, which appears on the left right now. So that's why I'm always pointing the wrong way. For this watch that you see, I gave this to the person who designed the Watches with Dennis logo. So, because he didn't charge me and I felt bad. So I sent him some of my pinball swag because he's a pinball person. But I also gave him the Vostok. So I've never seen him wear it. So I probably did. I probably permanently burned someone from engaging in the hobby. Millie Bays, welcome to the live stream. Richemont, just Richemont in general. I mean, they control a lot of brands. So I could see someone writing off Richemont just because of their price increases. But we're not gonna target entire conglomerates tonight. At least I'm not. I haven't written off entire conglomerates. Ken says, losing viewers at Vostok. Can we get to Rolex or Tudor? We cannot. Rolex and Tudor are not on my list. I have not written them off. I have to be honest. I can't just do it for clicks. But I will try and jump to something far more interesting than the Vostok here. Catching up with the chat before we do that. Underachieving says, Vostok is a great watch to give to frenemies. Long live Scuba Dude. Yes, the Scuba Dude. I was tempted, but I didn't want to spend that much, so I got a Komodorski instead. Gore says, my nephew got the Scuba Dude. The Scuba Dude is the one to go with. That's what everyone says, but I was too cheap for it. Escapement goes, I owned a Vostok Europe. That's a brand I wouldn't get again. And Skate Real goes, it's a nice looking Vostok. I mean, aesthetically, the dials are fun. They are fun, but the watches themselves, not so much. All right, so let's go with a dive watch that from a storied brand. It's not Tudor. It's not Rolex. It's not Blancpain either. But when people talk about like the first dive watches, like the first famous dive watch, I'm leading into it. I want you guys, you can start guessing, at least guessing in your head. It's not going to be a Rolex, and it's not going to be Blancpain. But there's a third brand that was known. There were three big brands, and I just named two of them that were the brands, like in '69 with the dive watch and all that, like the ones that just got really famous with dive watches. Which one did I not name? Because that's the brand I've next written off. I'll give you another hint, but this one's going to give it away before I show you the photo. This brand is best known for a serial killer. It is not Doxa. No. It's Zodiac. Oh, Zodiac. Your fun, colorful dials and your fun bezels. And look at this fun watermelon. The fun watermelon look of this. No, never again. No more Zodiacs. Absolutely not. What a frustrating watch in some ways. And what a cool watch in others. This one pains me. I still look at Zodiac watches thinking, you know what, Dennis? Maybe you should give them another chance. And I just can't do it. So let me say some nice things about Zodiac. First of all, when it comes to fun, colorful dive watches, setting aside the micro brands, because we know micro brands like to have fun, there are two brands that come to mind. Zodiac and it's Doxa. Doxa, I think, is a little more straight-laced with they're more like pure, this is going to be orange, this is going to be yellow, this is going to be bright baby blue. Like they like to do bright watches, but they're pretty uniform. They're pretty one color sort of stuff. Whereas with Zodiac, they were back, they're owned by Fossil, but they're doing their own Zodiac thing. And they're going to go around and they're going to do like this, a silver, radial brush dial. And we're going to have this like a scuba mask color, but everyone called it the watermelon, even though that wasn't really red. It's more of an orange at the chapter ring. And then the weird bake light green bezel. And we're going to have other really fun colors. And it's just, they're going to pop and it's going to, we're going to put them on these bracelets. So it's going to be kind of a dressy diver sort of look. And all right, so it's like, okay, so they got the fun colors. Other thing I will note, big compliment from me for Zodiac, the bracelets, butterfly bracelets. So you got like the deployant clasp, well, not a deployant clasp, but you got like the butterfly clasp. One of the most comfortable bracelets I have ever worn is on a Zodiac. That bracelet, what they do is they don't have the micro adjust. There's almost like an elastic material at the clasp. And so it actually has give just a little bit of, I'm like doing this thing and I'm teeny tiny picture. It's like a little piece of elastic and it just about this much give is what it does. But with your wrist swells and stuff, the watch still fits just like you had already had it fitting, assuming that you weren't already fully stretched out with it. So it actually was really, really comfortable. My problem with Zodiac was the quality control. I know people complain all the time about Seiko's quality control. The misaligned chapter rings and misaligned bezels are the main complaint. You all know the complaints, I'm sure. If you're watching this channel, you probably are into watches enough to know about Seiko's quality control issues. I also have additional complaints about Seiko and what they're doing with their accuracy on their movements. And I've actually think about doing a pre-recorded video. Actually, I've started working on a script for that because I kind of want to vent a little bit about it and target some of their expensive movements, but I'm not quite there yet. But with Zodiac, it was a mix of things. So I'm going to walk you through my Zodiac experience so you kind of understand. The one you see on the screen, I believe was, as I look, because it's actually not looking too bad, this was the second one I got. So the first one I got, there were multiple imperfections on the dial. And this was a watch that ran like $1,200. So it's not a cheap watch. Not a particularly expensive watch, but it's not a cheap watch. There was this, yeah, you can see my mouse. There was this, I'm going to blow this back up again. So here on the chapter ring area, there was like some of this orange paint was on the dial, like on the dial part where it shouldn't have been. The loom wasn't even evenly filled in on all of the hour indices. I think there was one or two that it was botched. There was like paint splatter where it didn't belong. There was botches there. And there were some imperfections also in the radial brushed pattern of the dial. The watch also was shockingly inaccurate. And I bought this new. So because I was at the threshold on the pricing, decided I would go ahead and open up and regulate the movement itself. Now, this has their in-house Fossil movement. Some of their GMT watches were using Bosch movements, but these use those STP movements. But it's basically like an ETA. But it had the little stud that you would twist to adjust the rate. So I put my screwdriver on, adjusted the little stud, it just snapped off. Now, when I opened up that watch, I voided the warranty, and I accepted that. I wrote back to the dealer and I said, look, I opened this up. The accuracy wasn't good. I tried to self-regulate it. I broke the stud off. Before I did that, I went to an area watchmaker who looked at it and said, I will not work on this movement, and gave it back to me. So I contacted the dealer and I said, look, can I get you guys to replace the movement? I wasn't even going to ask them to fix the dial and stuff. I noted that there were all these flaws with the dial, but I said, look, I busted the movement. What's it going to cost to get a new movement put in? I fully acknowledge that I voided my warranty, but I own it. I'll own it. That's fine. That's part of the fun of watch collecting, at least if you're going to muck around with them internally like I do. And the dealer, and I can't remember who I bought this through. It was an online dealer. They actually said, oh, this is a common complaint. The QC stuff on the dial front. So they're like, we're going to honor the warranty. We're going to just replace the entire watch. And when they shipped the next one out, The person told me they went and they had like 6 of these in their warehouse or in the back or wherever they had them. They said, I looked at all of them and got you the one that looked the best. And that's the one you see here. And it was pretty good. There were still some issues. There was one issue on the dial. You could really only easily see it with a loop. Once I saw it with a loop, I could identify it naked eye, but it was always hard to kind of pinpoint. So I let it go. But the problem is that whole experience, and the movement was much better running on the new one. But I try not to let watches that need to go in for service poison me on the watch. And I've had plenty, like the Parmigiani Tonda PF that I just got. It had a blemish on the dial. I sent it in. I don't hate the watch. My Longa I got, it was running plus 90 seconds a day when I got it. It had to go back in for 2 months to Germany for service. It's my favorite watch. So I can get past QC issues on watches, but Zodiac I started to read more, all the reputation afterwards. I just couldn't get over it anymore. And it was other than the fun color, there were just other things you can see kind of here. It's not just about the particular model, because I could talk about how I'm not a huge fan of baton hands. I'm not a huge fan of the approach they took with the indices. It's so very blocky. They're using 3 different fonts on it. Though I actually thought the Super Seawolf script looked pretty good with the Zodiac logo and the Zodiac name. I don't know about the rest of it, but anyway, long story short, plus it's not sapphire they use to protect these bezels. I think they use mineral glass on those. It's the sapphire for the middle, but the bezel is covered to give it this old-fashioned look with like a mineral glass. I don't know. It's a mix of things. But again, it's watches. We get to whine about what we want. But I've written off the brand since then. And every time I see something fun, and they still do stuff fun, I just can't do it. And I think Teddy Baldessar at one point on one of his videos did a review of Zodiac. And I left a comment about my experiences, and someone claiming to be from Zodiac replied to my comment. Basically, I don't remember exactly, basically apologized and said that they feel they're doing a lot better now. And maybe they are. But that's a bell I have not been able to unring since then. So let me go ahead and get caught up with the chat. I see a lot of you, a few of you guessed Doxa or Omega or Casio, but no, obviously it was Zodiac. MS Doni, I'm sorry if I didn't say your username, and anyone's username that I mispronounced, I do apologize. But thank you for watching the live stream. Heard Zodiac doesn't have good QC. You heard correct. They are owned by Falso Group, American corporation. Yes, they are, which is letting them survive as a company. So there is that. Skate Real asks, Zodiacs are too big? ? No, the sizing actually is on this one. I can't remember the exact size. On the smaller end. It's not going to be like the same degree as like a sub. It's smaller than a Submariner, smaller than like Orient divers and stuff, in my experience. MS continues saying they use STP movements, terrible reliability. Yeah, so obviously I had 2 different ones. One was bad and one was okay. Was within the specifications of the movement. Escapement says, I like Zodiac. The colors cheer me up, and they do a ceramic version of the Super Seawolf, which I quite like. I also like the stretchy clasp, like you say. I loved the stretchy clasp. The ceramic, I liked the look of in part, but the problem with, and again, for the price, I get it. The problem with the ceramic is it's not a ceramic watch. It's ceramic plated. So it's still this watch. I don't even have the picture up anymore. So let me throw it back up. It's still this watch, but they've coated the steel with a ceramic shell. So it's kind of it's plate. It's like gold plate, and I don't like plate. So if I want ceramic, I want it to be full on ceramic, and I want to be able to drop it and bust the whole lug off. I don't want to just bust the shell off and then see the shame of steel underneath it. But everyone's mind. I still think that they actually looked pretty good though. MS says Christian Ward is, or I think you mean Christopher Ward, is a good alternative to Zodiac, similar price point. Yes, I know Christopher Ward has a lot of praise, but I don't think their divers look nearly as fun. That said, their divers do fit my more conservative aesthetic by and large. Patrick with Pocket Watch Time says, I see myself selling my Zodiac. I did not know you had a Zodiac, but I can't memorize everyone's collection. Gorn says, I almost bought a Zodiac Super Seawolf Pro Diver until I couldn't unsee the male appendage hands. This reminds me of the complaint with the Bathyscaphe versions of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, where some people cannot get past our indices being nipples. So yes, it can be difficult. MS says, my philosophy is to buy decent quality watches, Tudor, Breitling, or Rolex, solid watches for a daily diver. Most of my purchases lately have moved more, I guess we would say, up market. But part of that is I also, the more watches I have, and this would probably be true for most of you, the less wrist time each watch gets. So when I end up consolidating down, it becomes easy to sell and then sell like a few watches or trade a few watches or whatever and put them towards one watch. So I kind of just start stacking them like Lego bricks. And then, my more inexpensive watches go away because it's like I can only put in so much wrist time on something. So I ended up going up towards the pyramid. But I know others that do it the other way, that they start with just a few expensive watches and sometimes they diversify out and get a bunch of inexpensive, or just a few inexpensive. They get kind of tired of collecting and just want a few things that they're going to always wear. There's so many ways to tackle the hobby. That's what's so interesting, I think. And I see the rest of you have been having, or there's a little bit of dialogue about the whole Christopher Ward aspects. All right, let's do an independent, or is it a micro brand? I'm giving you more hints. Y'all can decide one way or the other. This brand was a darling of collectors. Very difficult to get their watches for quite a while. I don't know if they're still riding high on this or not, but it's a brand I still see a lot of news coverage. Sometimes from some of their more ultra limited pieces, and sometimes from more of their more broad based stuff. But in this instance, I think most of you will know it. And that is Ming. Oh, underachieving in pocket watch time. Very, very good. Yes. And no skate rail. It's yes. Try and say Ming now. Not Baltic. I still own my Baltic. So, okay. So as you can see here, I owned the Ming Messina Lab version of the watch. Now this had QC issues as well. So this is probably a watch. Aesthetically, I liked this watch so much. I liked the series. I liked the Messina Lab version the best. The only thing is I preferred the one where you actually had the honey dial, but those were very, very limited. So I guess this is a little bit of a history lesson for those of you kind of curious about this version of the watch. So Ming normally, I guess, did a, open up the website and people would buy the watches. They do a lot of those time limited releases that so many micro brands like to do, that rely on those limited runs to drive demand for their product. In Ming's case, they wanted to do that with Messina Lab, and the site crashed, again. I was on their notification list because I was following this watch for the channel, and I really liked the design aesthetic for it. And because they had the issues with the website not working right, they ended up doing a lottery where people could write in. You were either on their mailing list or you could write in specifically about this watch, and they would randomly draw and then start offering people watches. And initially you'd be offered, do you want to buy the honey dial version or do you want to buy the black dial version? And then when they ran out of the honeys, it was just, do you want to buy the black version? So I got the email, I got the call, except the call was an email. And I was offered a black dial version of this watch. And I was like, you know what, for the price that it was, and I don't remember what, I think it was around $2,500, $2,800. And I went and said, sure. I'd never had a Ming before. There was so much that was interesting. Obviously, if you have that, there's a term for it. If you have that fear of like small holes, this would probably set you off and you wouldn't like this, but I was okay with it. I like the honeycomb pattern. I like that the sapphire of the dial is actually etched and the lume is filled in the sapphire. So this actually floats. You can see the shadow a little bit. This was not a great photo that I took, but you can see the shadow of the numbers on near the chapter ring because these are all actually floating above the dial. And then you just have this black within there. And then the hands were really well loomed as well. So I like the lug shape. That's what Ming's really known for, really nice lugs. So I just was like, this, I was really excited about. Watch comes. I have a video about the issues with the watch, but long story short, short. They often use, I'm going to mispronounce the name, Schwartz Ettin, they do some pretty expensive watches themselves, but they're a movement manufacturer. And Ming uses them for a number of their movements. And in this case, they decided, they being Ming, because they did it not just with the Messina Lab collabs, but they were going to do this with the whole model series that was going to come with the same basic, it didn't have the honeycomb pattern, but it's going to have the same basic layout. They did they got a little cute with the movement. They decided they wanted a gimmick. So this is a travel watch. Now you're like, it's not a GMT watch. Where's the second hand? There's no second hand. This, you could independently jump the hour hand. And so what they did is they took a movement, a GMT movement, and Schwartz Ettin modified it. And the hour hand that you see on the screen actually sits on the post for the GMT hand. And so that way you could independently jump it. And then I'm already looking ahead. Space, thank you so much. Trypophobia. Yes, fear of the tiny little holes, which if you look at enough wasp nests, I would totally understand why that would trigger people. But anyway, that's how it's, so you'd be able to jump the hour hand just to quickly change local times. Obviously you can't keep track of 2 time zones, but it was just like, oh yeah, if you're going to travel, you're going to fly from East Coast to West Coast, and you want to jump 3 time zones over, you just do that without having to spin it around a whole bunch. Like a cool little, party trick for otherwise what's fairly classical dress watch-esque look. It didn't work right. I mean, the jumping worked right. The problem was the minute hand would go around and the hour hand wouldn't always move. And you would have these scenarios where it would be like, right now you see it, it's almost aligned. This is actually, while it was still, this is an early photo I took. This is not right. This should be centered between the 1 and the 0 on this 10. It's a little off. It wasn't only a little off. I could actually get it to be 11 when it would still not even be halfway between 10 and 11. It would slip. The hour hand would slip. I actually have some time-lapse video on the channel. If you ever want to go back and look, I actually shared it with them. And it was a very interesting experience. So every single watch that was made, so the honey dial ones, these black dial ones, I don't remember the grand total. I think it was 250 units. They were all broken. Every single one was wrong. Was not really handled well initially by Ming. Like they had some somewhat snarky communications on Instagram. It really upset some people. They got called out a lot. I was treated pretty well personally. Like I reported the issue, and what's his name? Is it Jason Messina, the guy who owns Messina Lab? He actually called me that day and apologized about the watch and that they would, make it right. And they did, but it took a long time because they didn't know what was wrong. Ultimately, if you're curious, what happened is the Sellita base that Schwartz Ettin modified, there was a change, like, like there's a Sellita SW200-2. Like there was a change from the -1 to the -2 that Sellita didn't document. And it involved that GMT hand. Some of the parts had changed and they didn't have the same tolerance anymore. So at least that's what Schwartz Ettin claimed. So, which would make sense. So they indicated there were a couple of pieces that had to be changed out in the movement to make it more like the original movement that the plan said was this movement. And then that gave the GMT hand enough strength. Basically, it needed more tensile strength so that it needed a tighter tolerance so that it wouldn't slip. When I got the watch back, it didn't slip anymore. So I was cool with it, right? And they even gave me a free strap as an apology. And all of that. That is not why I will not buy Ming anymore. That was just an interesting story. I hope you found it interesting. That's just a story to occupy you guys' time. It's very simple. It's the crown. I could not stand this crown. I liked how it felt in the hand. I like how it would wind, but I'm right-handed. I wear my watch on my left hand like most people do. This crown, every time I would reach into my pocket or anything, would just gouge my wrist. Didn't matter. I wore the watch up on the wrist. I wear it on the proper side of the wrist bone. It didn't matter. That crown was sharp and it would always just leave a welt on my wrist. And it's like, this watch costs more than $2,000. I am not keeping a watch I don't even keep a cheap watch that leaves a welt on my wrist every time I reach into my pocket. And I was playing a lot of pinball then, so I was going in for quarters all the time. So it was like, no, I'm like, it's uncomfortable to wear. And because of that, and they've had this same basic case shape forever, I've had to write off all of Ming. They would have to change their design philosophy and actually change up how this case is structured and how that crown is structured. Will they do that? They maybe have on some of their specialty stuff. And so never, again, these are brands I've written off currently. So never say never, but currently, yeah, never. I see all sorts of Mings I love the look of. I like this shape so much, but it's not comfortable to wear. So I can't see myself ever having another one, which is unfortunate because I like so much about the design. This was actually the first watch I ever had that was mechanical that didn't have a seconds hand also, which was very curious to me at the time. But anyway, so that is brand number 3 that I've had to write off is Ming. So catching up with you all and what your comments are about this in the chat. Koji says Ming the Merciless Crown. Yes, you knew all about that. I've whined about this before. It's been a while, so I thought maybe for the live stream, some people would find this new. A new complaint. But the story of how the whole, like they had to change out all those movements for the full run that they were going to do after the Messina Lab run. So it was good it got caught with just a few of us who ended up with the Messina Lab collabs, but it was brutal. Ming's rep took a pretty big hit off of that. Not so much the mass failure, that was bad enough, but the responses they made publicly, because initially they were defensive and they claimed this wasn't very many models. And then, of course, it turned out to be every single one of them was going to show this problem. The only people that didn't detect the problems were people who kept the watches in the plastic to flip. That's really what it was. Skate Rule says, I love Ming. This one hurts. Well, it's just that it hurt me physically. Again, people make mistakes. The movement issue, I got it back. I wore it for months, and I never had an issue after they repaired the movement and got the new parts in. So, like, it's not a quality thing. It was just, unfortunately, that's a great story, and then it's just a sucky crown. I couldn't get past the sucky little crown. MS says, Ming, Fleming, and Jay and Shapiro recently started a group. They will be sharing manufacturing capabilities. That's interesting. I had not heard about that. Escapement says, Ming were really popular when they first took off. I haven't seen much from them recently. Has the Ming boat sailed? I think the whole like having to pay more used than new for them, that may have sailed. I haven't because I can't wear it comfortably. I've never priced them since. However, I've seen, like, there was a time where, was it Delray Watch maybe had a number of them and seemed to kind of fire sale them in the clearance section. So I think some people stocked up on a few of them, and that part of the hype part has sailed. Also, I think part of the issue for Ming, and we'll see if Studio Underdog, spoiler, a brand we'll be talking about tomorrow morning's live stream regarding their new salmon watch. Ming kept moving up every reference iteration in the price point, pretty big jumps. So they also, I think, kind of priced out where a lot of people were initially going in and getting a watch around what, $1,000, $1,200 US. And then like when these came out, it was, like closer to 2,500, and then they had watches over 4,000. It's just, they really jumped up in the pricing a lot. And obviously a lot of people that are going to play in that more micro brand space are doing so for the value proposition. There is no value proposition for a lot of people anymore when you're asking those prices. It's the design language competing against like Tudor and such. And it's just tough. It's just a lot harder, I think. So there's also that aspect. MS says, Dennis, have you ever handled the J.N. Shapiro? Can't wait to see it in person. American Haute Horology. I have not. I've heard about it. I've heard some interviews regarding like their efforts to get as much of that watch made in the USA as possible in that effort. But no, I have never handled one of those watches. Follow up saying, my second favorite American watchmaker is Keaton Merrick, based in Oregon. I do not know that name. And okay. We will move on to, that was the fourth one. So here you go. I forgot I was sharing the screen. So we're jumping to number 5. I'm going to end with the one that's going to be the most controversial. I have written off Omega. So why would I do such a thing, you might ask? Or maybe you wouldn't ask. Maybe you all have written off Omega. I like Omega. I respect so much about Omega. I get to finally talk about this one because I finally sold this watch. So And I liked so much about this. This is a render. This is not my own photo. I have plenty of my own photos, but it looks exactly the same as the render, except less rendery. There was so much I liked about the 300M. And again, this is not about the model. This is about the brand. But I'm going to let me have my lead in. Let me have my lead in. So this is the most like substantive dive watch I ever felt. So in the sense that when I picked this up, it felt like a luxury watch. I don't know what a luxury watch necessarily is supposed to feel like, but like just picking it up, the heft of it, where I see where some people are like, I don't want titanium because it feels light and it doesn't feel like it's substantial. Like Omega felt that, especially on bracelet, this watch feels substantial. It's a big watch. It's got heft to it. Obviously, there were design things. I didn't mind the helium escape valve. Not my favorite feature, but I didn't mind it. Omega makes my favorite gray dial in the biz, or at least radially brushed. Like this, the Aquaterra, they do it on a variety of their watches. I love their gray. I love it. So, I got this gray market, but new. And I wasn't wearing it too much. And there are a few reasons for that. This in particular, like the bracelet not tapering was the big one. It got hot spots. I put this on a whole bunch of different straps and all the rest of it. And with me wearing more dress watches in my current job, I started to cull the collection. So if it hadn't been the case, I probably wouldn't have let this one go in the way I did. Why will I not consider any more Omegas currently, again, per the title of this episode? And actually, underachieving's already covered it. Fat coaxial movements ruined the brand, and that is precisely my problem with it. It's a pointless stance because I am a drop in an ocean of watch buyers that will shop Omega. They do incredible things. They have some of the most amazing high-end stuff. That's the thing. Omega is seen as a brand by a lot of people because we think of their sports watches as a lesser brand to to Rolex, though the specs are often better for a lower price point. But Omega does true horology sorts of stuff. Yeah, none of us probably watching can afford it, but they do some really incredible things. But let me tell you something that they do that isn't incredible. They do not make a single male wrist-sized watch mechanical that is under 10 millimeters. And it's an embarrassment. And at this point, given how big of a brand they are, third in Switzerland, barely behind Cartier, I cannot tolerate a brand that cannot go to the trouble they can engineer a chiming chronograph and they still use the most ridiculous oversized luxury box in the industry that I have ever seen. I mean, like shipping this thing out, was like a 6-pound box and like 5.5 pounds was that wood box. Holy crap. It is the most elaborate box I have ever owned. I've had other boxes that are this size, but not like that material. But where is the engineering? Where is the care? They've stuck in this coaxial movement, which I am still not convinced is actually better than a regular movement. I know some people claim that it is, and they talk it up. I don't get it. Like, the only thing I hear about why coaxial is so good is like on the escapement part, it's supposed to reduce wear. But why do they say I'm supposed to get this thing serviced like every what? I don't remember, 6 years or something? Rolex says 10. Oris says 10, and they're not using coaxial in their in-house movements. Why can they say 10-year service intervals, and Omega's telling me fewer years, and I need to service the watch, but supposedly this is a reduced wear movement? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test. I'm okay with the movement. It is capable of great accuracy, but Omega has been using it for what, 2 decades now? At least over 1 decade, and they can't make it thinner? I could forgive it for this watch. This is a Seamaster. It's a dive watch. You can get away with it. But there are constellations that I've been interested in, like integrated sports bracelets. I wrote them off. They're not under 10 millimeters. I was like, if I'm buying a luxury integrated sports bracelet watch, it's going to be under 10 millimeters. It's why I won't get a Chopek. Chopek I was close on. They're barely over 10. Even those hand winds, like that CK, whatever model it is, the one that got popular after no one bought it. And then they came out with the gold one for the Olympics. That's a hand wind movement. It's over 10 millimeters thick. There's no excuse for it. It's sloppy watchmaking. And so it's more of a protest at this point, a pointless protest, because Omega doesn't give a crap about me or what I think, nor should they. But honestly, if they can't be bothered to get their watches under 10 millimeters, even their dress watches, I can't be bothered to consider them as a serious watchmaker. I don't care how deep their watches can go, and I don't care how much better their specs are to Rolex. They need to get it thinner. The DeVille shouldn't be a 10 millimeter plus watch. Not unless there's some purpose behind it. So that's the sort of thing. There are plenty of other things, like as MS has pointed out, like the bezel movement and such, like the inability to grip this watch in particular. Yeah, there's plenty of things, little nitpicks that I could have about like this watch in particular. It was still, if the bezel had been easier to grip, I probably still would have held on to it, quite frankly, because then I could have played with the bezel. But I have my Baltic, which does not have a problem letting me play with the bezel. But my problem with Omega isn't this watch in particular. It's just where I would go with their brand right now would be DeVille's and Constellations, because it better suits what I would wear most of the time during the week. But where it's like in Lord of the Rings, where Sam tells Frodo, "Don't go where I can't follow, Mr. Frodo. I can't follow Omega. I'm sorry. If you can't even get a hand wind watch under 10 millimeters, how am I supposed to take you seriously at this point?" I can't. I just feel like they don't want to invest in fixing up their movement. They don't want to spend the R&D. They'd rather rake hand over fist the profits that they get for getting all of you to continue to buy this technology that they easily had the return on investment in by now, this coaxial stuff that they bought into. They didn't develop it. They bought into it. So that's my problem with it. So anyway, they're my fifth brand, my fifth and final brand that I wanted to whine about, that I'm not going to currently buy from them. They get a watch that's at least 36 millimeters and is mechanical, under 10 millimeters. I'm back in the game. And I might buy a watch that's thicker than 10 millimeters. I just want them to prove to me that they can remember how to do it. Because right now, I'm not sure they remember. It makes me sad. It makes me ever so sad. Okay, so let me go ahead and finish up with these comments that you all have left. MS says, "I love Omega, but the retail prices are insane. I would buy a Tudor or Breitling over an Omega. Personally, if you're into Omega, what I would recommend is, if you're like a stateside, definitely take a look at Joma Shop. They often have a lot of models in the gray, and they're a gray market dealer, so you can get it new. You won't have the manufacturer's warranty, but you can get it new in box. And of course, they are prolifically available used. There is a lot of love for Omega. They trade hands quite regularly. So if you don't mind some scratches, secondhand is very easy to find pretty much anything that you want from that brand. Even some of the like limited edition stuff is not actually all that hard to find. And continuing on, I know why Dennis hates the Omega Diva, or the bezel movement can be better. I may have already highlighted that, but yes, it definitely could be better. But that's just more of a, it's a quirk. I get the scalloped bezel on this watch. It looks really cool. Like this render, I don't feel does it justice. The scallop actually, I think, looks a lot more attractive than the coined edge that we're used to. There's a reason why dive watches have those coined edge bezels, though. They're so easy to grip. I can barely grip this thing when my hands are dry. It's, don't get me on the bezel. Don't get me started. It's too late. I'm already going down the bezel route. Also continuing, MS says, "Heard through the grapevine that Omega is planning a Seamaster refresh in the next 24 months. There ain't no way the Seamaster is going to be under 10 millimeters. I wouldn't ask him to make the dive under 10 millimeters. I wouldn't. I think that'd be really silly of me to start expecting dive watches that thin. I mean, you could probably do it with things like micro rotors and such, but it's a dive watch. It should be substantial. I'm okay with that. It's just so much like the DeVilles. Like, why are they that thick? It doesn't make any sense. Tudor's 1926, which uses an ETA, well, probably a Solita at this point. Like, those are under 10 millimeters. It can be done. We have the technology. We've had the technology for 50 plus years. Omega used to do thin watches. They used to do very elegant watches. Now they do really, really fat watches that have nice dials. I struggle with it. Goran says, 100% agree. They are too tall off the wrist. And being a small, my wrist is about 6.75 inches. Yeah, again, if it's well enough balanced, it can be okay. That was part with this watch on the bracelet. hot spots aside, it at least felt balanced for me. Whereas like I've had a Hamilton that didn't. But if I put it on a NATO, it was a problem. So I was limited in my comfort options. For silicone worked really well for me for this watch. I didn't wear it all that much on the bracelet, which is why my bracelet didn't have very many scratches. MS also says, amen, brother Dennis. Agree with all the points with Omega, chunky bracelet, retail prices. Escapement says, I too love the Omega of old vintage, which I know you've commented on in the Watches with Dennis Discord, which there's a link to that if anyone wants to join it in the description below. There's no cost. Excuse me, apologize for the cough. I get why Dennis dislikes the thickness, but Omega still makes some great watches. I love the Planet Ocean, and the CK859 was a beauty. It is. I actually, in some ways, prefer the dial of the Planet Ocean to the Seamaster, but they're even bigger by and large. I know they've made some that aren't as chunky as the ones we often stereotype. And I actually went and saw the CK859 in at my local Omega AD. I wasn't there for that watch. I actually had just got this watch, and I was there because let me whine about something else really quick. Let me get close on the camera here. Omega. This is Dennis here. Why are you using the industrial grade Loctite on the screws in your bracelet? I have never in my entire watch collecting career, I've upgraded it from hobby to career. I've never had a screw fall out of a bracelet. Using a little bit of Loctite, a mild Loctite, like what Rolex does, I totally understand. I have some myself. I don't know what industrial cement you guys have decided to use, but it is ridiculous. All right, service announcement over. So the issue was I was at the AD because I had to, like a total loser, had to have them size the bracelet for me. I have never, so other than my first watch, which they sized for me when I bought my first Rolex 18 years ago, before I had any tools or anything, or was a watch collector, I'd never, while collecting, had someone size my bracelet for me. But I had to. I could not bust the Loctite, and I was so worried I would scratch up the bracelet. I used a hair dryer. I did a little tricks. We ran it under hot water. I did all the YouTube things. I could not get those screws out. I could not. So I went in and I paid them the whatever amount. Actually, I think I still have the receipt here because I did not send that to the new owner of the watch. I paid the $65 to the AD and had them size that bracelet for me. And so whilst I was there, they showed me the CK859, a beautiful watch, a hand wind only movement, decently machine decorated, and over 10 millimeters thick for no good reason. It's only to accommodate that ridiculous coaxial movement, which does not bring anything meaningful to the table, in my opinion. Moving on. Gordon says, my Planet Ocean 43 millimeter with 8900 movement gained 5 seconds over 5 years, and it wasn't because of magnetism. Sold it now was 16.5 millimeters thick. Oh, no, it met. One of the cool things about Omega is they will give you like the Metis certification. You can go and look up your own Metis report on the movement. So, and again, even though I got this gray, I had the Metis cards and everything. So I was able to go and check that. It's really cool. The movements are accurate, but my Tudor was within cost. The 1926 Tudor I mentioned using the ETA. Back then they were still using the ETAs. Again, we can have accuracy without the reliance on this. I mean, they got that Spirite technology. Is that what it's called? Spirite, the Spirite technology that they've done in that one watch that no one likes. I mean, they do such good things. Why can't they put their movements on a diet? Why is it too hard? Why can we not say no to the chips, Omega? Just say no to the chips. Put them back on the shelf. Just put them on the shelf. Your DeVilles can be popular again. They might already be popular. I don't know. Just let me have my burns. Underachieving says, I'd rather wear a Vostok Scuba Dude than the S&P 300. So many design cues I detest. I greatly prefer this watch to the Scuba Dude. I was going to say other than the dial because the Scuba Dude is fun. But again, I don't like this render. I probably should use one of my own photos, but I love this gray. Loved it. Love it. I still love it. Still one of my most favorite grays I've ever seen from a watch manufacturer. MS says, Omega Globemaster is my guilty pleasure. The Globemaster, yep, the dial is a lot of fun. It might have been Teddy Baldessar, who I first saw that on screen on. It's like, really liked the dial. He really liked on it. And so let's see. Pocket Watch Time says Omega, and it looks like a chili pepper. So are we saying that Omega is hot? So hot right now. It's the Hansel of watchmaking. If you want a Zoolander reference. Frank V, welcome to live stream. If I haven't greeted you yet, you have a DeVille squishy. I can't tell. This is way shrunk down, so I can't really tell which emoji you used. I do not have a DeVille. I only had this. However, I'm whining about the DeVille because if I was to get another Omega, it would probably be a Constellation or a DeVille. But that's mostly simply because with my current job, it makes more sense for me to wear more dress style watches than it does to wear dive watches. Whereas I was in t-shirts a lot more with my past job, and so I wore dive watches quite a bit. So let's see. Matthew mentions the Stova is under 10. He's referring to the Stova Classic Flieger, which is a 40 millimeter watch. It is a hand wind only movement. It is a Sellita. And yes, it is under 10 millimeters. Again, I think most people, because Omega used to do thin watches, I think most people accept that the coaxial movements have required a certain amount of clearance in the cases. And it's just, they don't have, I'm not going to say they don't have anything in their catalog that's not under 10, because some of their quartz ladies watches might be under 10. And maybe they have I've not looked at all the little 32 millimeter watches and stuff that might be mechanical if they've got any still. I've done searches for anything in their catalog that was at least 36 and mechanical. Nothing's under 10, I assure you. So, and everything's coaxial now like that. So I'm blaming the coaxial because I don't know what else to blame. It's not like they just decided one day all the cases needed to be thicker. It had to be to accommodate the new movement. But it's not a new movement anymore. That's what's so frustrating. And they continue to play with the movements like that spy rate technology. They continue to experiment with accuracy and such, but they don't. It's like, here's where I think the motivation is. I think for Omega, they don't sell very many dress style watches. And so they're like, people want to buy Planet Oceans, and they want to buy Ploprofs, and they want to buy Seamaster 300Ms, and they want to buy Moon watches. So who cares about 10 millimeter thickness? And on all those watch types, it's a fair thing to say. But when you come out with other watches, when you choose to make a dress watch, and I don't think most people would say the CK859 is anything but a dress watch. Why is it so thick? I don't understand it, other than that they don't want to come up with a thinner movement. Frank says, I wish they would bring back the Planet Ocean GMTs. Don't care if they're thick and big. And again, some people are gonna, if you're into those huge style watches, Planet Ocean is a. I didn't know they didn't have those big GMTs anymore. I thought Omega was still doing them. But yeah, I mean, Omega's got your back, guys, if you want that sort of stuff. Absolutely. Again, it's like Ploprofs, for example. Some people I've seen talk about wishing they would make some of the smaller Ploprofs, and it's like, I thought the Ploprof was for people that wanted big old chunky Ploprofs. Let Ploplof. I can't keep saying that. Let that be. Absolutely. Yeah. If you want a chonker watch, Omega's got your back. They've got a number of them. And some people do want those sort of things, really thick and substantial watches like that. But not in a Constellation, right? I mean, that's like an integrated bracelet style watch. Why would we want that to be a chonker? I wouldn't. But again, it's my channel, so I'm going to say what I want. You all will say what you want in the chat or in the comments if you're watching the recording. Right. Let's see. Ken says, I wouldn't buy any Omega, as Swatch could make plastic versions at any time. They're going to be different. They're going to be plastic. That's the first thing. Omega's not going to plastify their own thing. Do you think that the next Swatch collab will be in Omega? Because I thought it will be the Seamaster. I thought it will be this. Probably not this color. They'll probably do fun colors. But that's what I do think they will do next. But that's what my head says. My heart says they should go ahead and do a Breguet, like Type 20 Breguet, do another chrono. More so because they desperately need Breguet to actually start selling some watches, which I assumed was why they chose Blancpain, because it's not like the vast majority of people out there were really ever talking about Blancpain. Underachieving says, I wish Omega would make a reissue of the 165.024. I don't know anything about Omega references, so I'm going to say yes. Thumbs up. Do that. MS says, upvoted. Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Escapement goes, loved the service announcement. Yeah, that is a bit I do on one of the pinball podcasts. Sometimes I have to talk to the manufacturers directly because they sometimes lose all sense and they need someone from the outside to bring them some reason. Not that they listen, so it doesn't really matter. Goran says, I use Loctite 242 and 243, but only if I have a screw start to come loose, which has only happened once. I think that's what I can't remember. I think I have 242. I bought whatever watch you seek suggested. There was a whole Loctite discussion if you want to look into Loctite, because I have heard about screws coming loose, which is why I did buy it. I've never had it happen, but I have heard about it. MS says Tudor is starting doing metas. Yes, I had heard about that. I remember that's where I think Omega and Tudor wants to be in competition with Omega. I'm not sure Omega wants to be in competition with Tudor. I'm gonna change that. I'm sure Omega doesn't think they're in competition with Tudor. They think they're in competition with Rolex. So, but they're all in competition. Goran says, it's the only toothpaste cap helium escapement on the latest Omega SMP 300 that irks me. Yeah, well, and of course, if you like the classic vintage look of the Omega 300 non-M, you can avoid that. It's the classic style. The sandwich style look isn't my thing, but I know some people who prefer it. Pocket Watch Time says, my Omega Chrono was 19 millimeters tall, had to sell it. That was my Hamilton. I had a Hamilton. I did not write off Hamilton, so it's not in this video. But I had a Hamilton khaki Pilot, and I think it was over 19 millimeters with one of those. It had the H31 movement, but it's one of the Valjoux 77 5X style movements. Oh my God. No. And I'd never had a Valjoux before, so I didn't understand I've had watches where you can feel the rotor wobble. Like I can feel it on my Breguet. I can feel it a little bit on the micro rotor on the Parmigiani. I could feel it quite a bit, but not uncomfortably so on my Grand Seiko spring drive I used to own. But that Valjoux, it felt like the watch was a helicopter. And as thick as it was, it wanted to fly away. It was like, and off it would go. Off on an adventure without me, or maybe with me. It was so big, it was going to just rip my arm along for the ride. I don't know. That watch had to go. I gave that one away. I have since then, if we wanted to do a sub category of instead of 5 brands I won't buy, 5 movements I won't buy. I will not buy Valjoux based movements, period, anymore. Ever since that, unless they didn't have a rotor. If it was hand wind, I'd be willing to consider it. Escapement says, I dislike most things about the SMP 300M. Okay, it was a Bond watch, but please, Omega, put it to bed and design a new watch for the next Bond film. The slippery bezel, the non-tapering ugly bracelet. In James Bond's defense, they did start to let Daniel Craig wear things like Aquaterras and such in some of the other scenes. So they weren't all just the SMP 300s. I'll go ahead and throw it back up because I think just looking at me is boring. MS says, Swatch groups should sell Breguet. They can't manage them. I think a lot of Breguet fans would hope for that as well. The helium escape valve. Ugh. And then Brian, welcome to live stream, by the way. Cartier is a jewelry manufacturer. They make good watches. I owned a Cartier. I have not ridden that brand off. I don't own it anymore, but I have not ridden that brand off. And they would be my go-to example, back to our beginning discussion, of brands that aren't first and foremost watchmakers. In fact, in Cartier's own admission, at least I think it may have been their prior CEO's admission, they consider themselves a jeweler, not a watchmaker. But I do think they make very nice watches. I do think they do better when they stick with the Bosch movements and not do their in-house stuff and focus more on design. But they have a very good design language. And historically, lots of watchmakers relied on third-party movements and just worked on the cases and the dials. The Holy Trinity and their reliance on JLC is a case in point. So I don't hold that against Cartier. But yeah, I also do use them as an example of a company that can have its eye on multiple balls and still successfully accomplish running a watchmaking business. I mean, they are the second largest in Switzerland at this point, based off of dollars generated on sales. So, all right. MS says, I hope be there, buys back Breguet. I know it's a fantasy, but a man can dream. That is quite the hope since he has his own brand now. And MS also says, pre-owned Chopard watches are a bargain. Think good finishing and under 10K. Sign me up. I actually looked quite a bit when I ended up pulling the trigger on the Parmigiani Tonda PF. The Alpine Eagle was on the short list. There is a regular viewer. I cannot remember who it is. I think it might be one of my 99 Set Club members, but I don't think it's someone who's in the chat tonight, who I believe does have or did have an Alpine Eagle and spoke very highly of it. I did check those out when I was in Dallas earlier this year. And I like the dial, the bezel. When you first glance, you do kind of get a Royal Oak vibe because of the screws, I think. I would say, but everything else about the watch feels very, very different. So, or maybe or do I get more of a Nautilus vibe? Anyway, I'm not looking at one right now. Doesn't matter. When I see the dial, I immediately don't think of either of the watches. It's more of a bezel look, but it's neither here nor there. But anyway, I would say, and I see Gorn has added on Talking Hands guy, but what's Andrew Morgan? That's his name. Andrew bought the Alpine Eagle. Yes, it's a nice watch. I'm actually more interested in Chopard's LUC line, but again, as I've noted, I wear dress watches during the week, so an LUC, which is their dress watch line, would generally be more appealing. Like I just wear it more often, but for like an integrated, if I was into integrated sports watches and wanted to get a whole bunch of them, which I don't, that one might be like a second one I would get. It's tough because if I already had one that was under 10 millimeters thick, I might look at Chopec at that point, especially now because Chopec's prices are coming down. Like their hype, you're kind of like Ming, their hype's sort of falling, and I'm seeing secondhand. Those watches have shed thousands of dollars. So now you can start finding a lot of them closer to that 16 to 18,000 instead of the 20 to 22,000 they were going for a year ago. So it's still though, they're a bit thicker than I think they should be at such a price point. I think an integrated sports bracelet watch should be thin. This is my take. And Bulgari Octafeminismo is another good alternative. And again, Guido, who used to be the CEO, I believe, at Bulgari, is now who is running Parmigiani, which would explain why some of those elegant design motifs are in the new Parmigiani PFs that they're doing, the Tonda PFs. So anyway, that will be it for this live stream. I'm not usually on in the evenings. I'm not usually on Friday. I hope those of you tuned in live enjoyed it. I tried to make it entertaining. Thank you, everyone who participated in the chat. Obviously, I'm not a panel. It's just me interacting, and you guys are how it actually flows. Otherwise, it's just me kind of staring and talking about several watches. But that's basically it. I will be back tomorrow morning my time, for my usual Saturday morning live stream, where we will cover some of the new releases, like the new Studio Underdog. And so I will see some of you then, maybe. Most of you probably not, because it is a weird time, but it's when I can be consistent, which is why I do it. So otherwise, I appreciate you all being here. If you're watching the recording, just leave comments on brands that you don't like, that you wouldn't currently buy, and maybe what you would like to see them change that would get you back into their possible business. And I'd enjoy reading those. So that'll be it. And I will bid you all a good night, and I will talk to you all on the next stream. Take care, everybody.